Hello and welcome to today's webcast from Range 4 in partnership with eSynergy. eSynergy are a leading IT recruitment company specialising in the open source market, placing both interim and permanent IT resource. I'm Helen Beale, Head of DevOps at Range 4 and the host of the webcast today. And today's webcast is about DevOps and Agile, and it's a panel discussion. On our panel today, I'd like to welcome Kay from IBM, Steve from AppDynamics, Craig from Range 4, Paul from Nokia, and Andy from Chef. So to kick things off, Kay, could you please tell us something about the goals of Agile?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Helen. So the key characteristics of an Agile project is to enable us to get to stable code that is what we call done. Fully implemented, fully tested, ready to go into production in short time-boxed iterations. That enables regular and continuous stakeholder feedback, and that is produced by having self-directed whole teams. So when I talk about whole teams, I mean the client is involved, the developers, the testers, all working together in small whole teams to deliver that code. And they should be working at a sustainable pace that enables them to continually do those short time-boxed iterations.
Great, thanks. And Paul, perhaps you could tell us something about the goals of DevOps as well.
Yes, so the DevOps movement came from sort of the other end of the spectrum, whereby Agile and software delivery is around getting stuff out the door quickly, getting stuff out quickly. DevOps, from the operational side of it, being able to manage this rapid change, the operations teams have to sort of like look at how they can work with software development and these agile teams that are moving very, very quickly to be able to release and service and look after the platform. So DevOps comes from the other end of the spectrum, so that operations teams, where traditionally they were completely and utterly separated from the act and the plan of delivering software, converged back in towards development teams, and working and taking on some of the agile techniques of iterative implementation, working together as opposed to silos. So the DevOps movement came realistically to make things easier for the operations teams.
Great. And Andy, from what you've just heard then, how would you summarise the differences and what's your opinion on how these two things converge?
I think, to be honest, the aspirations of both teams are fairly similar, and the customer, the end user, is driving the way that we're delivering services. It's about delivering things that are meeting business needs quickly, in order that the website that you're using delivers the services required. Where do they differ? I think historically developers have had aspirations around writing code, and many systems administration people have actually been goaled on keeping systems alive and a little bit reticent to write code in the past. But as the computing world has changed, we're talking about large arrays of relatively small computers. We're talking about cloud computing. That's driving more and more people in the operations world to think about code, because you need to systematize what you're building.
Agreed.
I could just add to that, Helen, as well. Agile and DevOps are very much complementary approaches. Agile is about doing more things quicker, delivering smaller incremental features sooner, and proving delivery capability. And DevOps can certainly benefit from this. I mean, Agile has its roots in software development, which is the dev part of DevOps after all. And ops themselves are looking to embrace software development principles, things like versioning of infrastructure as code, and automated testing of infrastructure. So they are different paradigms which can, operate independently, but when you put the two together, they can coexist very effectively.
Yeah, this is Kay. I agree. I think I like to think of DevOps as Agile on steroids. So it's actually bringing in the operations folks into the Agile movement to enable not only the code and the applications to be developed, but that those applications can then be deployed into production continuously too.
Yeah, and Kay, I'll also come back. Kay, you mentioned that it's about small self-enabling teams within the Agile community. Increasingly, we're seeing people with a DevOps capability working within those teams.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to, just before we go on to the next thing, is one key difference that is still apparent, I believe, between operations and development, is the fact that the development is incentivized or rewarded, or whatever you want to put it, on change. They want to deliver as much change as possible for the consumer. Operations teams are rewarded, incentivized, whatever you want to put it. Their mainstay is stability. So there is fundamental differences from the approaches, but again, the convergence is, I think, the realization that things are moving quickly. Operations teams can move quickly, so they can meet in the middle.
And I think that kind of answers one of the questions that I've just had through from one of the attendees, Suma. The question or the comment is, Agile is fast for sure, but not sure how DevOps complements it. Ops and Dev, unless they're part of the same Agile teams, how is it possible? So does somebody have a comment on how you would, if you would put Ops and Dev on the same Agile team, or how you might organise yourself around that?
Yeah.
Personally, I think that works. Yeah, I think that does work.
Sorry, Kay next.
I'll just dive in very quickly.
Successfully used in a whole bunch
Kay,
of
go ahead.
customers that we work with. Sorry, on Kay.
I think it's important to have an ops person on the Agile team, even if the organisation isn't actually planning to put everything into production on the iteration boundary. Having the operations person on the team able to perform some of the typical testing that the ops team does on those small pieces of work is key to enabling the work to go into production whenever the stakeholder wishes it to go into production.
Thank you, Kate.
The other thing to add on that, Helen, as well, is that both DevOps and Agile require significant process and culture and behavioral change across the teams. And it can be helpful from experience to use Agile to introduce DevOps change. So I come from a Scrum background, so setting up Scrum teams that have DevOps monitoring, networking people as part of that team, and doing regular daily stand-ups so that the teams are communicating, really breaking down the barriers of communication. And then maybe that you start some of the smaller initial Scrum iterations around smaller DevOps change. So looking to maybe automate the deployment of a monitoring solution, or automate the deployment of a source control solution. You can use Agile, and in particular the Scrum-based approach to Agile, to do small increments of DevOps. So they do coexist quite nicely.
Great, thank you. Paul, did you have a comment?
There was just one thing. In an ideal world, yes. In an ideal world, having operations and development team co-located, working quite happily together in Scrum planning, etc., is great. In the real world, you normally have you don't have that co-location. You'll have an ops team in America and you'll have a development team in Belgium. What you can do is use different phrasing, different conversations during the planning, such as a very simple thing, acceptance criteria of a story could be, how's this going to be monitored? How's it going to be supported once it goes live? Then you start getting the software engineers to start thinking about the operational side of this change that they're just about to make. So there is ways and means of doing it, subtly or not so subtle. But the idea is trying to get that mindset and that culture embedded so that you have the developers thinking of ops and also have the operations thinking a bit more like developers, like how would they have built this, that sort of thing.
Thanks, Paul. So agile operations, Steve, do you have an opinion on whether this is a sensible term to use?
Yeah, certainly. I think the challenge that I've seen when I first started working in agile projects was that all of a sudden the operations teams were not expecting the rate of change and weren't really geared up for it, and of people being able to handle that rate of change. It's an interesting point just a few seconds ago around including the non-functional requirements into your stories. So making sure we're taking consideration of that when we're building up to deploy new releases, because there's a whole host of projects where how we're actually going to deploy the new release, how we're going to monitor it, those things aren't really addressed. So pulling that in at an early stage in the process is really critical to make sure we don't have issues when we're trying to make a release and realise that we've done something on the operations team that they didn't really expect and can't really manage.
Okay. Helen, for me, I'm seeing the Agile moniker being applied more and more to different areas, and I always go back to the original principle behind this, which was the Agile Manifesto, and does that really stand up when applied to operations? And I believe in the main it does, because the Agile Manifesto says let's respond to change over following a plan. Well, operational environments are constantly changing and always need to be reacted to. Yes, we do make plan changes to infrastructure, but by and large, we're dealing a lot with, reacting to changes. It's all about individual interactions over processes and tools. And yes, when things do go wrong in environments, you get the root cause analysis, which really does require different teams of skills, different individuals to come together. And again, at its heart is, it's working software, or should I say, it's working operational environments over comprehensive documentation. And let's be honest, some of our infrastructures these days are so comprehensive and way beyond documentation. It's all about keeping the software or the environment working. So I think in the name, the Agile Manifesto stands up for agile operations.
I'd say one of the central themes of DevOps is really around automate everything possible. And that means the delivery pipeline. So the code that the developers are writing gets pushed through to production through a pipeline with certain quality gates. And a second theme of DevOps is often voiced as developers with pages. So we do get to a point, I think, where you can have agile operations because the pipeline is known, there's a skill set that's known, and we have people responding to problems very quickly.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add on to that is if when we take something like a Kanban, for example, which is again a flavour of the month, that's more in tune with an agile operational team than it is really a development team. But fundamentally, most agile methodologies come back to manufacturing and that sort of thing. So there are similarities in running an operations team and an operations setup as there is Toyota building cars. They're still the same sort of thing. Kanban and those sorts of things do work well with operational teams, and that sort of complements, again, going back to the development paradigm of Scrum and other agile techniques, goes back to the manifesto. So I think they all sort of meet in the middle.
Absolutely. So we just had a couple of questions again from the audience, which kind of should quite neatly, I think, lead us into the next discussion around traps to avoid. The first question I particularly like, since it's quite closely linked to a blog even that I just wrote recently, around the challenges for enterprises with DevOps around history, habits and heroics. The question from Alex is, isn't the issue history? Historically, Ops and Dev have been at loggerheads. Ops have to support something that doesn't work. Dev have to fix stuff that Ops don't know how to use. So how does history create traps for ourselves? Craig, do you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, the key element of trying to introduce a concept of failure is getting all teams together to embrace failure. So rather than have this batting back and forth of who is responsible, you set up collaborative teams that work together from both dev and operations, and you look to try and use DevOps principles to push as much as the operational practices to the left of the development path as you can. So you fail within a dev environment, sooner, rather than wait until something is deployed into live and then, wondering why it doesn't work. It's all about getting things like environment replication earlier in the development process. So your developers are working with tools and environments that are indicative, as close as possible, to the production environment. DevOps tools and continuous delivery practices help with that. And I think these have all borne out of past experiences, past mistakes. So I think people have fallen into traps in the past, but the continuous delivery model is all about trying to avoid those based on empirical experience rather than, hype and theory. So.
Agreed. Andy, what do you think? What traps should we avoid?
I think there are many traps, and I think there are quite a lot of lessons that we should not have forgotten from the way that systems were built some years before. 2 or 3 traps I find. People use the term DevOps, but they don't necessarily understand it in much the same way as Agile is used pretty indiscriminately. So work out what these mean within your organization and how you're going to actually achieve your goals. Somebody mentioned a moment ago about different teams that are perhaps in different locations. Well, many organizations have service providers providing specific functions for them. I think you've got to have a full and open conversation about what services you must provide to one another in order to be successful too. The final trap that I'll mention, but there are a few more in the back of my mind, are about tools. People believe that tools will solve these problems. And DevOps really is a cultural and professional movement. It isn't a set of tools. So you've got to think through your process and what you're trying to deliver rather than rely on a specific platform to solve all of this stuff for you.
And that rather beautifully kind of concretes Alex's comment that he's also put down here, that DevOps is key first and foremost around culture. And I think you've also answered another question that he had, which is about geographically separated or co-located teams, quite neatly there. But he's also asked, how do you deal with the imbalance of sheer size? Dev teams are usually much larger than Ops teams. Ops needs to understand the platform in its entirety in order to operate it. This imbalance needs addressing to support typical global 24/7, 365 platforms. Do you have some thoughts on that, Andy?
I do. Historically, developers have been given free-for-all to build on a platform that suits them, and they haven't necessarily fed back through to the operations teams what that platform looks like. So using better process and automation, clearly you can get to a position where you build a platform which is consistent from development through production. And actually, the operations guys can write policies and push them back to developers to reuse, which makes them very much more efficient. So you get the consistency through the whole of the pipeline that you're working on. That's the first point I'll make before letting somebody else on the panel have their thoughts.
Well, the thing for me is it's all about interactions between individuals, and rather than throwing arguments back and forth as to why things don't work and shouldn't be tried, you should be getting dev and ops together in the same room. Maybe using agile approaches to thrash out their differences as a team. Because a team that works together comes up with the right results together. There's a lot of tooling in the marketplace and a lot of hype, so people are naturally a bit reticent to just assume that all the benefits of DevOps come when you buy the tooling. I think if you just get the right individuals in an organization together and allow them to experiment and try their own thing, you do start to find that some of those barriers, such as environment discrepancies between development and live, start to be eradicated. It's all about eliminating, the problems in the delivery pipeline, so that you don't get problems in production. You identify problems together as a team sooner in the process.
Yeah, I believe in blame-free post-mortem. Look at what you've done and learn from it.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about was on the distributed teams. I think that's one of the traps that we fall into by saying that none of this can be done unless you're co-located. Within IBM, we are always distributed. Most of our projects are run out of various time zones, and they still work. It's about ensuring that when you first set up a project, that you get the people talking together, you have the right communications tools in place to enable the distributed teams to talk to each other. And I think that's a key facilitator there.
Exactly. I mean, very much so. I worked with a project recently where the dev team were based out in India, and the operating environment was a cloud provider in the USA. So lots of different time zones at play there. We amended the Scrum process to take account of that. We had 2 daily stand-ups, and the central UK point was where everything came together. You have the interactions, you have the concept of the virtual team. It's just making sure that you keep those communication channels open and clear at all times.
Yep.
Okay, I can't remember who came up with Code Unites Us, but Paul, do you have some thoughts?
If I may, just one. Just before we move on to the Code Unites Us, one of the things that is a trap that people really should be wary of. It's not easy. Bringing culture, bringing any change, individuals have to go through their change curves, they have to go through the inner turmoil, there will be history, there will be bile, there will be all sorts of stuff. It's not easy, but you can make it easy by using certain techniques borrowed from Agile or even psychology, whereby you bring people together to solve a common problem. If you can point out that both sides of the coin have the problem, then they can work together to come up with a solution. Which brings sort of into the Code Unites Us bit, which is again common language. Developers develop code. That's all they do. They're looking IDEs all day and create binaries that are then shipped. Servers, infrastructure, basically the same thing. They are numbers and codes, etc. And you can bring those techniques into the ops world where you are creating servers from code, from source control. So there is a degree of unification, and again, a conversation where both sides are starting to talk about the same thing, coming at slightly different angles, but there is that unification. So yeah, I mean, Code Unites Us is a good way of putting it. That there is a common standpoint.
Thanks, Paul.
I would say we're engineers at the end of the day. As the breadth and scale of systems has increased over the years, and we all recognise the need for uniformity, so that we've got a good standard of build that we're compliant with. I think you have to recognise that you've got to do that using a system. And we're at a point now where people understand shell scripting or PowerShell well enough that we can actually start to build these things to give a complete and automated build.
That kind of brings us quite nicely onto the next slide, and we've had, I think, already this discussion about culture being the core part of DevOps, certainly, and Agile perhaps less so, but tooling and virtualization automation. Steve, as at Dynamics, what's your opinion on where tooling fits in helping Agile and DevOps achieve their goals?
Sure, I think firstly, I totally agree that the fact we need cultural change is the first thing. But the new breed of tooling in the market is really helping us get there a lot quicker, and just by enabling ops teams to get visibility into the code that's being executed much easier, which was horrendously difficult to do before. Allowing people to automate server builds and deployment way quicker than ever before is just allowing people to realize the benefits that we expect from DevOps and from Agile. I think without some of the new breeds of technology, we wouldn't really be able to realize the benefits that we expect from these different processes. I think we'd still be stuck with some of the existing challenges.
I think it was Paul that came up with, if it moves, monitor it.
Yeah, I think one thing that, I was just about to say, monitor if it moves, monitor it. So having a nice, open, transparent view on what's going on is great. But one thing with virtualization and automation that I think most people see is the ops. Ops are getting this AWS, this cloud, this lovely way to automatically spin up environments, which is great. But also the other thing is, if you go back to the developer building something locally on his PC, hands it over, oh, it works on my PC, it works on my environment. The other thing that is really good with virtualization and automation is being able to bring some of live environment back onto the desktop. So an engineer has the capability to spin up a server, a virtual server, which is basically the same mirror image of the live server, and run his code on it. he doesn't need this great data center stuff. And Vagrant and those sorts of tools are really, really good to allow engineers, again, to have an insight into the operational side of things as well. How does this run? What's my NFRs? Can I monitor it? Can I set all this up before he even has to go near a server?
Well, it's back to the concept of failing early in development. If we catch the fact we've got issues really early in the life cycle, we can address them rather than dumping it into production and realizing, oh, we've put a serious performance bug into prod. So it comes back to failing early.
I think also with
I think as well, with virtualization coming on stream in a big way, we have all of these cloud providers, and you could argue that we may not have a DevOps movement in the future. We may have a dev cloud movement in the future because more and more dev teams are working with cloud providers to get their operational infrastructure, and more are looking to the cloud for their production environment provision. So the virtualization has been a key enabler of that.
And the automation into the cloud environment will provide access to everybody to ensure that the quality of the code that we are producing and deploying is of a standard that our clients are willing to accept.
I would say virtualization in the cloud have made the business realize how easy it can be to provide infrastructure on demand.
Agreed.
They've created a problem for operations. Humans throughout evolution have been great at identifying solutions to problems, and the way we do that is we build tools to make things easier. I heard a phrase recently, tooling is culture institutionalized. It's something I've been thinking through a little bit.
Yes, you can imagine the conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to say, go back. Oh, someone dropped off. I'll carry on talking as there's a gap. The other thing is, going back to this common viewpoint, is virtualization such as Chef, Puppet script, Chef scripts, whatever, is code. Developers can relate to that. They can get together with operations teams. So again, the virtualization and automation has sort of reignited some geekness in the engineering community, which they want to get together with the ops guys to work out how they do this wonderful stuff with spinning up servers in a couple of seconds. But it's not the be-all and end-all. It's a tool, a set of tools to enable to solve a common problem.
I think also what's important is to enable the orchestration of the environments through the automation, so that within minutes a new environment can be spun up to enable a certain set of testing, for example, to occur in the environment, that we can look at just small chunks of code, make sure that that is testable and tested, and that or large chunks of code to do performance testing or security testing against, which will give the ops the confidence that what is being produced actually will stand up when it's out there. Because I think a lot of the concerns that we've seen in the past is that lack of confidence, as we've all said, on the code that's been produced and whether it will hold up once it actually gets into production.
The cloud providers are great in an agile way, because historically, to try and get a dev environment made available to a team was something that took quite some time and organization. Now in Sprint Zero, you can go to a cloud provider and switch on a dev environment with a lot of prepackaged components that you need pretty much within minutes. It doesn't take an organizational, purchase request, a server engineer to build some servers, a software guy to install some stuff. You actually just switch it on within a matter of minutes, if not seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say that getting into production environment virtualization is still relatively untapped. So it's extremely common within dev and test environments, and I think now it's been within the enterprise for as long as it has, people are getting more confident and looking at it as a real alternative to on-premise data center use. So if you've got a pretty spiky workload throughout the year, so say you're a bedding provider or financial services provider, now it's being seen as a real option that you can use that for your burst capacity more and more in production. I think that's going to be continue to grow heavily in the next couple of years.
So I've had a couple of questions around tools, and I kind of said that we didn't want to make today about tools. We wanted to not specifically kind of talk about Chef and Urban Code and things. But we've had another question as well. With so many products available in the orchestration space, how do you go about choosing the right solution? So perhaps if we start with Craig, if you're there, have you got any comments on that?
Yes, I'm still here. I mean, the orchestration one is an interesting one because that's all about making all of the components you need come on stream when required. It is very closely tied to the tooling question. All of the big tooling providers represented on this call and out in the industry will have a preferred way of going for their orchestration. But what they do all need alongside that is the people orchestration. And to come back to sort of the agile principles underpinning this call, things like the product owner role within say a Scrum team is changing because when you apply a DevOps context, the product that they're dealing with is very much technical product. It's no longer functional product. And I think the kind of product owner for a DevOps agile project you need is quite a specialist skill, which isn't out there. So, and also the kind of resources that we need in the agile team, are starting to change as well. And we shouldn't underestimate the level of change involved. Having developers, talking in terms of infrastructure components, having, infrastructure experts dealing with APIs from cloud providers, it is massive change, and it's something that needs to be orchestrated to make any DevOps project a success.
Obviously, I work for Chef. I work for a tooling company, but I would say the best way to choose your tools is to take a stand back, look at the business problem that you're trying to solve, and then present that in terms of a number of use cases that the tools have to show you they can address. I see too many people doing feature and function bake-offs, but not thinking about the higher level business problem.
I also think there's that you should be looking at how the tools integrate with each other, because coming from this end-to-end perspective that we're now looking at with DevOps, we need to be able to see the traceability from the requirement to the final product. And so keeping that in mind when you're looking at your tooling solution for your organization is a key success factor.
And as we're talking about success factors, why don't we talk a little bit about rewards as well? So, Paul, you were going to say something.
Well, just before we move on to the rewards, end user requirements, people that are going to use the tools, engineers, make sure that they get, that they have buy-in as well. There's nothing worse than someone in management or some consultant coming up with, oh, we're going to use this new tool, it's wonderful, it's great, and the engineer sits there and goes, I can't use this. They have to be brought in. Maybe they come up with the ideas. Maybe they feel more included because they have had some input into choosing the tools. One thing you've got to remember, again, going back to what was said before, there's a business problem to solve. There is a problem to solve. What can we do? Do we buy tools? Can we find tools? How do you do it? As long as it justifies by solving the business problem, then you shouldn't constrain yourself. But then don't just go window shopping for nice pretties, because the engineers will stay there forever.
The thing about Agile is, you have to give the teams autonomy. That's one of the key tenets of the Agile approach. And the team, makes the decision, for the benefit of the team. So it's a key that you get the right people into that team and trust the decisions that they make around tooling. Agile is about that, rather than sort of macro management.
And how do we reward people for making the right decisions and making a success of their projects, Craig?
Bonus, cash. I mean, people are incentivized in many different ways. One of the good things I like about the Agile approach is that you are delivering, frequent stories, frequent quick wins that are highly visible and can be, recognized as achievements. You're not putting all your eggs into a basket that is, 3, 6, 12 months downstream. You're not going for that, end game. You're starting with smaller incremental pieces and get that working, get that successful, reward the team. I mean, within Agile, another key principle is that the teams become sort of self-rewarding and more productive through that because they are delivering successful user stories sooner.
And I think you were at Pipeline Conference a couple of days ago, weren't you? And you were asked the question about where do you start with DevOps, and we're talking about auditing and metrics. So
yeah, I mean, the key thing is with a lot of DevOps and even Agile projects is trying to baseline where you are today so you can move things forward. And that is quite a big exercise because it covers on many dimensions. It could be tooling. Tooling is a key part, but you've got the process. How willing is an organization to embrace change of the scale of Agile and DevOps? Who are the individuals in place? Can the silos feasibly be broken down? And if they are, what are the reward mechanisms you need to put in place to allow that to happen? So, to be able to measure any sort of improvement, you do need to identify that baseline. And I think more and more organizations out there are looking to establish that baseline so they can build a value case around, the whole Agile and DevOps approach.
I think one of the rewards I see for team members is the opportunity to learn new skills. By bringing together the developers, the test skills, the operation skills into one team, it enables us to see what other opportunities there are out there for us to do different types of engineering and to learn those skills.
thanks, Kay. I've got another question from Alex.
Yeah, I regularly attend.
That's
Paul, do you want to say
Go
something,
ahead,
or shall I ask the question?
I interrupted.
Okay, so the question from Alex,
okay, very quickly.
The CIO, CTO, CEOs fit into this? It seems there's a lot of delegation, which is good, a lot of control, which is good, being handed to these teams of Agile DevOps people. So what do the CXOs do? Kay, do you have an opinion on that?
Yes, I think they're still very important in terms of interfacing with the clients to understand what the big picture and the vision is for the projects, to enable that communication with all of the stakeholders of a project. Because unless we understand, not just what the end users want out of things, but also what the principals who are actually paying for the projects want, then we're not going to be able to provide the right solutions to all of the stakeholders.
I would say that one of the things any business leader can do is lead by example. If they are representing the teams or the company, and the company has decided that they want to work in an Agile and DevOps way, they need to take that, embrace that, and they need to also lead and show others in the business that that's what they're doing. There's no point saying, yeah, that's really, really good, I like the way you're doing that, going to a customer and then come back and saying, well, I don't care about all that, we've got to deliver it in 3 weeks. That really, really doesn't send the right signal. So they have to believe it, they have to live it. It's not just bottom up, it's not even top down, it's across the board, it's this culture shift.
I think you've answered kind of the next bit of Alex's question there as well, which is, does this period of integration between dev and ops mean that the CXX level managers have to change too? And I think the answer is very much yes, isn't it, Paul? Kay, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that yes, and we need to educate the CXs as well on the processes and the benefits of these methodologies that we're talking about today, because they need to be bought in, they need to be supporting, just as Paul said.
And one thing I would say on the rewards part, I know there's a bit of latency as it was just in the note, would be there's simple ways of adding sort of subtle rewards in there. So as I said, engineers get rewarded for change, and ops people traditionally get rewarded for stability. So maybe you can introduce certain elements from one to the other, such as If there is a half-year bonus based upon, for the engineers, based upon the amount of stuff they deliver, maybe part of that should be uptime. You know, it has to be, if the ops guys are incentivized to have a 99.995 uptime, then the engineers should have that as well, and vice versa. So you again get the barriers broken down. Very simple tools and techniques, but they are really effective.
So about 5 minutes left. So thanks, Paul. Let's spend a few minutes talking about some recommendations on what people can do next. So Paul, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your book?
Of course, yeah, my publisher would love me. So yeah, this was just written from my experiences of introducing DevOps and CD within the Nokia Entertainment business, and it was just observations. So there's some bits in there that really sort of introduce people into what the hell it's all about. It's not definitive. There's lots and lots of material out there, but it does go through very simple things such as the evolution of a business. So you know, something like a small startup by their own, they're actually a DevOps and Agile setup. If you've got 5-10 people in a room, you work together, you do stuff. They grow, get bigger, acquired, things start to splinter, then you can turn it around. So it's a start, you know, really for people who want to understand where to start and what to look for next.
And then secondly, we're talking about studying the Agile Manifesto that I think Craig mentioned earlier. Kay, can you tell us a bit more about where people can find the manifesto? We will send links actually to all of these things out afterwards, but what should they look out for when they're studying the manifesto, Kay?
Particularly the things that were mentioned earlier, how you know, we are really focused on culture, we're focused on working software, we're focused on working closely with our clients over traditional ways of managing the projects. There is also on developer work some very good material on, and it's called the Agile, and there's also a DevOps Learning Circle, which are step-by-step guidance on how to learn more about both Agile and DevOps.
And I'll make sure there's links to both those learning circles in the follow-up email as well. Thanks, Kay. There's also the Velocity event with my very interesting spelling of Barcelona I've just noticed there, so apologies for that. Who'd like to talk about Velocity? I think we may have lost Craig.
Yeah, no, I'll have a conversation about that.
Thanks.
I think one of the most important things is to listen to people who've been doing this for a little while, but also give the opportunity for people who are engaging in the ideas around Agile and DevOps the chance to ask questions. If you get to places like Velocity, you'll find that there is an awful lot of enthusiasm for what's going on, but people are also very, very realistic. All too many times they're happy to share some of the things that they've learned through errors that they've made as well, and that can only help the community.
Okay, thank you.
What I would say is it's still quite early in the development of both movements. I mean, so far this week I've been to both a DevOps conference, a pipeline, as well as attend an Agile training course. And when you go to these events, obviously everybody knows their particular domain, but aren't aware of the other side. So there's still a lot of work to be done to try and make teams embrace both approaches. And it will be difficult for some organizations to embrace change of that scale. But I think, as was mentioned earlier, DevOps on steroids is what you get when you apply Agile to it. And I do believe that is, by applying both, you are getting the best of both worlds.
And it's good you're back.
Yeah, I was going to say, Agile, and there's any number of conferences, sort of both online and in person, you can stream or you can attend or you can even catch up on. The amount of literature and publications out there is immense and growing.
And the fourth point on the slide, actually, Craig, is the DevOps Cafe podcast that I know you're a big fan of. So can you tell us a bit more about them?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a popular one in the sector. It was from a guy who I think was with Chef in the early days, but is now very much an independent. And I like it because I like to retain that independent mind away from the hype and from the tooling vendors. And the guys who run that podcast are also of that mind. The other one I would mention is the Agile Weekly podcast. I mean, both of these are from North America, as you may understand. But that is very good around the whole Agile movement and how it does stand up as an independent approach for dealing with problems on a large scale, by delivering features smaller, sooner, and more frequently. So, by subscribing to those and plugging them into your phone, you can keep abreast of some of the latest developments in the space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend, if you have opportunity to see John Willis at a conference, it's a sight to behold. He's an amazing guy, and he's really, really funny.
Probably be at Velocity.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he is, but he normally turns up to these things. There's lots of things you can look at, but one thing I would suggest is the audience. Engineers are, if you want them fired up, if you want software engineers and ops engineers fired up for this new world of DevOps, get them along. The energy and the buzz and the ideas that they come back with is great. Leaders, managers going fine, and consultants going is fine, but then you have to try and recreate that buzz and that energy. And as I said, people like John, they're just amazing to watch and extremely funny on some occasions.
So I think we're out of time today. Thanks, Paul. Thank you to all the panelists. I think we've learned that DevOps and Agile are by no means mutually exclusive. I particularly liked, I think it was Kay that originated that DevOps is Agile on steroids. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you especially to the panelists. We will follow up with emails, so let us know if you need any more information from us. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Cheers, Alan.
Bye.
Thank you.